At the beginning of the 18th century, France was still a predominantly agricultural country. Unlike England, it hadn't yet been touched by the Industrial Revolution. Most peasants lived in conditions of serfdom, while the bourgeoisie had certainly grown wealthy through trade but had no political or military power. On top of that, the feudal system restricted free trade, preventing them from increasing their wealth further. Throughout the 18th century, France engaged in numerous wars, which led to a severe financial crisis. When Louis XVI ascended to the throne in 1774, he aimed to fix this economic disaster. To do so, he appointed several finance ministers, first Robert Turgot, then Jacques Necker, and later Alexandre de Calonne. However, all three failed in their attempts to reform the state's finances, mainly because they tried to impose taxes on the nobility, without success. In 1788, France was also hit by a major agricultural crisis due to worsening weather conditions. Crops were ruined, bread prices skyrocketed, and popular discontent spread. As tensions grew, the king was pressured into calling the Estates General, an old representative assembly that had not been convened since the reign of Louis XIV, the Sun King. Elections were held to select representatives, with voting rights limited to 25-year-old men who met a certain income threshold. Voters were also asked to compile the Cahiers de Doléances, grievance books, where they expressed their main concerns. Surprisingly, most complaints were about the feudal system rather than the monarchy itself. The Estates General brought together the three social orders of France: the nobility, the clergy, and the Third Estate. The Third Estate was a diverse group, including both wealthy individuals and the poor, but it represented 98% of the population. It demanded more seats, and the king granted them 600, while the nobility and clergy each received 300. However, the real conflict arose when the Third Estate demanded that voting be conducted by head count rather than by order. Traditionally, the nobility and clergy voted together, outnumbering the Third Estate. The king remained silent on this matter. On May 5, 1789, the Estates General convened at Versailles, but since the voting system remained unchanged, on June 17th, many members of the Third Estate broke away and proclaimed themselves the National Assembly, determined to address taxation. 3 days later, when they found their meeting hall locked by the king, they moved to the tennis court and swore an oath not to disband until they had given France a constitution. This marked the birth of the National Constituent Assembly, which even gained support from some liberal-minded nobles and clergymen. Meanwhile, in early July, the king dismissed Necker, who was presiding over the Estates General. This was seen as an attempt to halt the movement for change, sparking outrage among the people. In response, riots erupted in Paris, and customs offices were stormed to seize flour sacks. Then, on July 14th, the people stormed the Bastille, a prison that symbolized royal oppression, where political prisoners and those convicted of crimes of opinion were held. This moment was crucial. The people became a political force, directly opposing the absolute monarchy. Later in July, after days of unrest, order was somewhat restored when a new municipal administration was formed in Paris. To ease tensions, the city's officials presented the king with a tricolor cockade, symbolizing unity between the monarchy and the people. In response, the king withdrew his troops from Paris. But the revolution didn't stop there. It spread to the countryside, where peasants revolted against the feudal system. They burned castles and destroyed documents that bound them to the land as serfs. In reaction, the National Constituent Assembly abolished serfdom in early August 1789. Finally, on August 24, 1789, the Assembly issued the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen, which established fundamental principles like equality before the law, popular sovereignty, freedom of thought, and freedom of conscience. And with that, the French Revolution had truly begun.